you could just take back if you took on g6. So rook g6 had to be played. Gives black white time to prevent everything somehow. Or at least it should. Isn't it just to run with this one?
And it's not a problem if I also run with the a pawn.
Just run?
Run, run.
Well, you don't need. You could play this one. Shouldn't be a problem. But why not? Well, after this one, we're talking very theoretical, or but this is not.
Whoa, rook a5.
It's not a fighting move because you can just play rook b8 if you want to.
Yeah.
I believe.
It's just there's barely any space for the black pieces. That is a huge problem.
It is actually kind of.
It's like a back rank play.
But if it's Magnus makes Wesley so makes it easy, just takes here, and he keeps everything queen c5 with it after the check. Well, just run with the c pawn. An incredibly natural move. Is there something? There might be. There's a trick.
What is your trick? You want to take on d6.
But even this doesn't work. Because you can just take this one.
And then rook b8.
Rook b8, or if he takes with the queen. And he can actually just take or not take, he can play this move. It's actually also mate, I think. What a cool...
We're even with the piece down, white is still winning.
Yeah, this is quite cool actually.
The back rank. See the g6 pawn? You see why Wesley pushed g6? We didn't understand at first that it was so dangerous. The b7 pawn falls and it's all over.
But he can win in any way he wants to. There is also after rook a6, he could also I can do the different things, I'm sure.
Tough times for the world champion, trying to hold on to this position. Rook g8, preventing rook takes g7. That was the last move by Magnus Carlsen, and now Wesley has the option of playing
different things. Bishop e7 looks tempting too, just to take this one.
Capture on f6 and rook h7 mate.
If he goes here, a little bit careful about bishop queen rook b6 because then the queen might suddenly enter afterwards. Running with the c-pawn looks incredibly natural. And here, we're just running again. Well, and that must be signs I'm not.
Always the same idea on the back rank, the c-pass pawn together with rook b8.
I think this is kind of the quite cool line. Well, if you play this move, just so this, if you take there, that's not, well, you cannot take there, you have to take back. This was kind of a fighting option actually.
If the bishop gets back, captures the f5 pawn, at least the c8 square will be covered.
This, I'm sure this is lost too, but this is at least
not so lost.
Not that simple. Well, I'm sure this is lost too, of course. But thing is that Magnus Wesley could probably trade rooks but just run with the king is not getting out. But I think after rook a5, I think the simplest is just to take this one and take this one too with something. And
does this trade of rook, the trade of rooks, do you think it gives some extra hope for black, or it is becoming worse now?
It's absolutely nothing for no contemplate the a pawn, but the white king's position is a little bit more open. But I don't think it's any danger the white king here. The queen is very well placed on either c3 or c5, I think. It's important perhaps to cover the g3 square, preventing checks on g3. It's just that things like this is just, you can just take it.
And then the rook comes to the back rank.
I think so.
Yeah, this would be game over again.
It's not completely clear because...
oh, some checks! I missed that.
But I think you can just go here.
Queen a2. Wow. No more checks, and if the rook is captured, c8 queen or rook. c8 rook is a mate.
Different ways of winning.
Oh, take a rook.
He's thinking that's probably a good decision because here is no reason not to be 150% sure. Just say there you can calculate everything till the bottom.
That's true. Good tip from Grandmaster 𝙬𝙬𝙬𝙘. Even if your position is completely winning, take the time to calculate everything properly instead of wanting to show off with your brilliant tactical skills and win the game in 10 seconds. I think it's better to be sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
And this is not a shame to think. So it's not like, oh my, he has to see the winning immediately. No, you don't have to.
And
you don't have to play fast.
And the thing is that it's such a crushing win too. This is a completely crushing position. Like Magnus is being crushed.
Yep.
It's also possible to play something like this, I guess. Let's say the pawn runs and just move the rook somewhere. This seems to be an option too.
Beautiful. Once again, rook h7 mate at the end of the line.
Seems to be quite controlling everything.
Queen takes f6 prevents a1 queen.
Yeah.
Just controlling that square as well. Really, really painful position for the world champion. But as Hikaru and Maxime pointed out, they thought that Magnus was asking for trouble by risking.
Yeah, they actually were a bit skeptical about Black's opening play, weren't they?
Yes, they were critical of his opening play. And they said that Magnus was provoking Wesley. So we have been quoting Magnus during the entire day since he was mentioning that he had no trouble whatsoever, no problem at all in any previous game against Wesley. He thought that making a draw was fairly easy if he wanted a draw, but he didn't want a draw, he wanted to be more ambitious.
Sometimes when you are... He played c6. Sometimes when you're on a winning streak, as Magnus is, very good form and so on, sometimes it's actually good to lose a game because then it strikes you back down on earth again. And
reminds you that you're still a human.
Exactly, because sometimes you may think you're a god and you can just do anything and you relax, and that's definitely a dangerous feeling.
Do you think that that's what happened to Magnus? Thinking that everything works.
Well,
he was disappointed with his two previous draws. He wanted to play for a win, but his opponents didn't really give him a chance.
Yeah, it is a phenomenon that's not unknown, that you sometimes get too confident, actually.
Yes.
I'm just looking again. Rook, if the game ends like this, didn't we just look at this, c7?
Yes, we did. Even losing the piece, blundering rook takes d6 was still winning for white.
Is it?
Isn't it the line that we looked at? Or it's not winning anymore? Bishop
d4,
bishop takes
There's something
f5.
wrong here. So what did we just look at after?
Okay, let's not go that optimistic. c7, maybe not yet.
So rook a6. Does it make a difference? Can you just throw in
rook c1?
Rook c1? It doesn't really...
Does it change the fact that after c7 the bishop is hanging?
Exactly.
The queen is defending both the rook on b7 and the bishop on d6. That's why c7 is a move that we are doubting whether it works to sacrifice a piece.
And Magnus just gave up, actually. He just gave up.
And it's over. Magnus resigned after c6. Wow, that means that suddenly from a tournament where we had a sole leader with a point difference between Magnus Carlsen and the rest of the field, it is now a joint lead here at the 𝙬𝙬𝙬𝙬 Norway Chess Tournament, with Magnus Carlsen and Wesley So leading the tournament on a +1 score. +1 I had to calculate, and also it changes the 𝙬𝙬𝙬 withdrew from the event. Some of the players had played against him. As Vichy mentioned, he only has one free day, that's tomorrow. He doesn't have another game coming up with 𝙬𝙬𝙬. But yes, this changes everything. Suddenly the tournament is wide open.
Yeah, probably it's good for the tournament actually.
Definitely, it's good for us chess fans.
I know the Norwegian TV, they cover only one game. They only focus on Magnus' game. They don't care about the others. So
they do check the other games too, but of course the main focus is Magnus Carlsen.
Yeah, the main focus is there. But we focus. But I think it's just good for the tournament that Magnus actually lost. It's not good for the Norwegian audience because they love to hail Magnus. But
he
maybe
can still win the tournament. Of course, this doesn't mean that Magnus doesn't have a good chance of claiming the title this year. But now, finally, there's a race for the first place.
Yes, even that is the case.
Tell us on social media what you think about today's game. Do you think that Magnus took too much of a risk? Do you think that he was provoking too much Wesley? Or what went wrong in this game? Use the hashtag #NorwayChess to let us know about your opinion on today's main game between Wesley So and Magnus Carlsen, or the rest of the event. We will be joined by Wesley So very shortly. He will first be interviewed on TV2, so we are waiting for him to join us and let us know about this decisive win against Magnus. His first win in a classical event, isn't it?
It is actually his first win. I was just, while you were talking, I was just looking at this line just to see if Magnus will
resign because of C7.
I would just wonder if this is the reason. It's very, very forced. And this seems actually to be just in time for and here I think this is resignable actually.
Still, even with the piece down, the threat of D7.
It's just one tempo behind. But it's typical Magnus to resign, even though he kind of finishes the pain and get out of the situation as quickly as possible, rather than letting himself being looking. He would look quite foolish if this was the end actually.
Yeah.
And it just get over with it.
And the players are still in the playing hall, analyzing on the board, discussing some of the variations. It's good to see that Magnus is not so upset. He didn't run away from the board.
Yeah, but he's holding his head, is he? Well, not really. He's analyzing. That's nice. But I think he accepts that when your opponent really has played well. I think sometimes he gets very upset when he's done something horrible.
And in this case, it wasn't a one-move mistake. It
wasn't really.
It was slowly, steadily being taken over.
Right. He was actually being outplayed, but it was something critical. He lost a pawn.
The pawn sacrifice is what Hikaru and Maxime also criticized in that moment. He went for bishop d8. We can show that moment where Magnus decided to sacrifice a pawn with bishop to d8 instead of going for something more solid with bishop f6, which was Hikaru's suggestion.
That it seemed like a critical moment, but the question was perhaps if. Then there is b6, I guess. I'm not sure why I didn't play bishop f6. I think Magnus is struggling with a bad harmony of his pieces, and now these bishops look stupid for a little while, but not necessarily for that. Well, maybe it's only for a little while. The moment he manages to play bishop to g5 and f6 and get the bishop back to f7, everything is saved, I think.
Yes, and the pawn doesn't.
The main thing is that he doesn't lose a pawn.
Hikaru said that he thought that Magnus's approach was a bit similar to Fabi's when he went for dynamics, sacrificing a pawn for the purpose of a dynamic play, but there was not enough compensation simply after queen b5. Bishop d8, queen b5 is what happened in the game. We can show how he lost the pawn. So bishop d8 is offering a pawn. This is the move of Magnus Carlsen in the game, move 23. And after queen d5, two pawns are hanging. Queen b5 seems to solve it because it protects the b7 pawn and attacks the b4 pawn. But it just wasn't the case. What was
because
going on
it
here?
was simply
Yeah, bishop b6.
the thing was that I think is that
This is very ugly.
and,
c6.
and c6 seems just to win.
And then you take on b7 and it's game over. You promote the b pawn.
It's as simple as that. No tricks here again.
The problem for black is that he cannot play b takes c6 attacking the queen because there's a pin on the c file.
Yes, and the rook will
So
fall
when you
in
take
there.
the white queen on d5 with your pawn from c6, the rook is hanging on c8. This was the main problem. I'm sure that Magnus saw that he cannot take on b4. Simply he was hoping for a dynamic compensation for the sacrificed pawn, which was not the case in the game.
If this one goes here, which seems to be a bit forced, is